Well, I hope that you're doing well. I hope the week is going well for you. If you're sick or hurting in any way and we don't know about it, as always, please let us know so we can be praying for you. We love our God. Our God is powerful, and we want to be praying to Him for all the things that are going on in our life. We'll go ahead and jump straight into it. Tonight we're going to be in Genesis chapter 4, starting in verses 5 through 7. That's going to be the text for the topic of conversation, Genesis 4, 5 through 7. There's a little more said in Genesis chapter 4 in regards to the story that we're going to talk about, at least a piece of it tonight, the story of Cain and Abel. And we really want to not focus on what was wrong with Cain's offering as opposed to the offering of Abel. Now, let me tell you, people can speculate all day long. The scriptures don't say. So anything we come up with is just pure speculation. Abel's offering was more excellent than Cain's offering. What in the world does that mean? Well, your guess is as good as mine, right? It's speculation. The Bible doesn't say, but we do know, let's not forget about what we know, that God favored the offering of Abel more than Cain's offering. Cain offers from the ground. Abel offers from his flock. We do know those details. Usually when people talk about the story of Cain, here's where I'm going with all that. Usually when people talk about the story of Cain and Abel, this comes up for conversation. We're not going to talk about that. We want to hone in on basically the internal struggle of Cain that we can see as we read throughout this story. Now, when I say the internal struggle of Cain, I'm talking about the struggle that he's having with his conscience, because if we pay close attention to what the text actually says, we see him wrestling back and forth with his conscience. So, let's go ahead. Let's just start in verse 1. Now Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel brought of the firstborn of the flock and a portion of their fat. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So watch this. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. Now the first thing we notice about Cain, when we see that God did not regard his offering in the same way that he regarded Abel's offering, is that he gets really angry. Now, anger is an emotion that you have to do something with it, because if you don't, it is just going to continue to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, and eventually it's going to boil over. And this is the problem with people when it comes to anger, right? Because when people get angry, they don't say anything to the one that has made them angry, and as a result, they sit there and let that anger fester until it just comes out and they do something that they regret. In fact, people talk about that like in counseling, people that have anger issues and they go to counseling, there's like different steps, as there are different steps to a whole lot of stuff that people have come up with, but different steps to anger. It starts out by a person being triggered by someone or something. Okay, we know something causes someone to get angry. That makes sense. But then that's not the only thing that happens. People attach a belief to that thing that triggered them. Usually, this is in regard to somebody. Somebody makes somebody angry. Okay, anger is triggered. Now that person that was angered attaches a belief to that anger. This is, well, I know why they did that to me. They did that to me because, and maybe that's the case, maybe it's not. We attach some kind of belief to it. And then we start to really sort of fantasize a little bit about getting even, or even not even just getting even, but totally destroying that person in some type of way. Listen, I know that we've all been angry before, and we've thought about things about other people that we didn't necessarily do, but the thought of that thing, it crossed our mind. So it starts with some type of fantasizing of something happening to that person, getting even with that person, getting justice, right? Maybe even getting one over on that person. That's enough. I've said too much now. Okay, then after that, there's some type of regret in some type of way. People that, actually carry out what it was that they were thinking about doing, they usually have regrets about it. Man, I shouldn't have done that. That really was too far. That wasn't good. This is the consequence of anger. And here's Cain. He has a choice. He can get it all out there, but he's allowed himself to become angry to the point that, notice what the text says, that his face fell, or that his countenance fell. You know what that means? It means that Cain is walking around like this, like he has his head down. So much so that when he comes in contact with other people, he can't lift his head up to look them in the eyeballs. That's what that means. He cannot look them in the eye. Why? Because he's experiencing shame. He's been humiliated. Now, usually when people are shamed or they're humiliated, guess what they'll do? They don't want to be around other people. Why? Because their countenance is fallen, their face is fallen, they're ashamed, they're humiliated. This is what's happening to Cain. And as a result, what happens when people experience that? If they don't want to be around other people, they tend to isolate themselves. Now, this is just a terrible combination, right? When somebody is angry, but they're also experiencing shame and humiliation to the point that they want to isolate themselves, guess what's going to happen? That anger is going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. Terrible combination, but this is what's happening. Cain is experiencing isolation. He can't go and have conversations with people. He can't look up and look them in the eyes because of the emotions that he's experiencing. Now, here's the problem. There's nothing wrong with experiencing these types of emotions. That's human. The problem is when we let our emotions dominate our actions. In other words, when we let our emotions take over our mind, when our emotions rule us to the point that they drive our actions, that's wrong. Our mind ought to drive our actions regardless of the emotions that we are experiencing. Now, that's easy to say, hard to do. Any person that's ever been angry before recognizes this. But notice the slippery slope here. I mean, everything is not going well for Cain. Now, the Lord answers Cain. The Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen?" Now here's what's interesting. Have you ever read that before and thought, why in the world does God ask that question? He knows exactly why Cain is angry. He knows exactly what's caused his face to fall. He knows why Cain can't look people in the eye. So why ask Cain that? Well, have you ever noticed that when people get angry and they isolate themselves, what they don't want to do? They don't want to talk about why they're angry. They don't want to talk about why they're isolating themselves from others. They don't want to actualize what it is that they're actually feeling. So God is, he's not like trying to rub it in more on Cain. Cain feel more of the pain by me asking you this quick. That's not what he's thinking. God is trying to get Cain to actualize his feelings. Cain, tell me why you're angry. Let's get everything out in the open, because when we get everything out in the open, we can actually deal with it. You think about people that go to like couples counseling or something, and they sit down with the therapist, and the therapist just sits there and asks a series of questions. Why? Why does anybody go to counseling? They go to counseling, to answer questions? No, they go to counseling to get everything out in the open, because when everything's out in the open, that's when something can be done about the situation. That's the same thing here. God is trying to help Cain get past his anger, overcome his isolation. If you do well, God says, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. Now, God knows that Cain has a conscience. Why does God know that? Because God put a conscience into Cain, right? We know right from wrong. Whether we're Christian or not, there are some things that we know. Why do we know them? Because God has impressed a part of himself on every single human being, whether Christian or not. We've all been made in the image of God, right? So Cain has this conscience. And here he is, he's angry and he's isolated and he's going back and forth. Man, I really would like to do this. I really would like to see this happen to Abel. I shouldn't be thinking that way, should I? And he's going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's a battle between good and evil. And God just simply tells Cain, I know you're angry. I know that you've chosen to isolate yourself because you're humiliated, because you're ashamed. Okay, you have a choice. And I'm sorry, my phone is going off. Now my dog is barking. Let me go ahead. I should have turned on Do Not Disturb before I started. Okay, yeah, never mind. Okay, so where were we? So God knows this. And God simply tells Cain, listen, quit trying to complicate everything. Quit trying to let your emotions influence your decisions. Quit doing all this stuff, okay? It really is simple, Cain. You have a choice. You can either choose to do well, to choose to do what is right, or you can choose to do what is wrong. Now, he says this interesting thing, God, and if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. That is a very odd way to describe sin. Have you noticed that? Notice what God says. Sin is crouching at the door. Something that's crouching is like, it's lurking, but it's ready to... I'm sorry for snapping. My dog is like making all sorts of noises and it's getting on my nerves. So anyway, sin is crouching at the door. It's lurking around, but it's lurking to the sense that it's ready to pounce on the person that lets it in the house. It's like sin is some kind of animal that really wants to attack and destroy the human being. That's the way that God pictures sin here. Now, here's the thing about sin. If we have sin in our life, we can either get rid of that sin or sin can remain in our life. But let's not fool ourselves. If sin remains in our life, it can't just stay the same. It's always going to grow. It's always going to get worse and worse and worse. We're either going to get it out of our life and it's going to get a lot better, or it's going to continue to grow. In other words, sin is not static. Sin is always active. So God is telling Cain, you really need to deal with this issue. You really need to get it out in the open. Because let me tell you something. If you don't choose to do good, you're going to sin. And if you're going to sin, it's going to be really bad for you. It's going to consume you. You're going to regret what it is that you end up doing if you don't choose to do what is right. Haven't we seen that throughout all of Scripture? Haven't we seen people that have given in to sin but had the strength because they allowed God to give them that strength to overcome sin and to do what was righteous? But haven't we also seen people that give in to sin and as a result they go down the slippery slope some more and some more and some more, and they're in some more sin and their sin continues to grow and it continues to grow? This is the pattern that we see throughout Scripture. We have a choice at the end of the day, no matter what it is that we're struggling with, we're either going to do right or we're going to do wrong. God says it. That's the choice. The choices that we have to make. There are two paths and we get to choose. Let's not overcomplicate it. So we can see, and I'm wrapping up the lesson now, we can see how Cain really struggles. And God is trying to help him overcome his struggles. And God is using his conscience. Conscience is a good thing. It's God screaming at us, stop and think about what it is that you're going to do. Cain did not have to do what he ended up doing. He let anger continue to grow in his life. He let isolation hurt him. He failed to get his problems out in the open and to deal with them in the godly way. God was willing to help. Cain rejected the help of God. He freely chose to do that. And he chose to do what it was that he ended up doing. And as a result, he experienced the consequences of it. That was a lot to say in just 15 minutes. But I hope that you have a great rest of the day. I hope that you'll finish reading the story of Cain and Abel. Maybe jot down some more lessons. Can't wait to see everybody Sunday. God bless.